Well, everybody, welcome back to World Politics. I'm Nick Palavita. I'm not going to be your host. Mark Lee will be the host, but we're going to look today at the debate that's taking place, and I'll try to get rid of my echo. So let's talk about the debate. What do you see, Sasha?
Interesting. Yes, I was watching debate live yesterday, and it's a mixed feeling I have um, because Trump has not participated in the debates. And he's in a huge lead over all others. So these debates are quite pointless in many ways because uh, their views are they're They're just the views of private people who, for some reason, believe that they have to voice them. Why? I really don't know because many times, actually, a few of them made mention that Trump has to be there in order to make it meaningful discussion. He's not. He's not going to participate in the next debate just as well. So, I mean, they're fighting for the right to be vice president, to be selected vice president for Trump, because if they indeed fight Trump, then they had to do it the right way, but haven't. So I really don't understand the meaning of this debate. What is it for?
Hmm.
Nikki Haley was okay, but sometimes she was overly aggressive, in my opinion. Um, Tim Scott looked quite well at times. Um, Pence, zero effect at all. He in first debate, he looked probably the most presidential of them all yesterday. Complete flop. Um, well, let others deal with that.
Hey, Sasha, just along those same lines, and I'd love to hear Adam's thoughts because we never did get down to the blank check aspect all the way because of what went on technology wise and all in that space. But even to what you just said, I did read recently today that former President Trump has said that none of those seven on the stage will he have as his vice president. So he's already written them off. So he's basically, I guess, looking at the uh, governor from South Dakota, I believe is what Nick said she's from, and maybe some others. But he and his staff, it sounds like they pretty much wrote off everyone that was on that stage. So maybe your point is correct that if there is a third debate, what are they actually debating for? Are they lobbying for a job within the Trump administration? Should Adam be correct? And Trump will be the second president to win after he had won, then lost, and then would win again because Grover Cleveland was the other one, and all in that kind of space. But what exactly are they doing with these debates and all in that kind of way? Because, like I said, I just saw that like maybe a couple hours ago that he had basically said, none of them do I think that they are vice presidential material, to your point.
Adam, what was your thoughts on the debate?
I largely agree with Sasha. I think the debates are essentially pointless because Trump is so far in the lead, and these candidates are simply not impressive. I think DeSantis probably did the best out of all of them, but that's really not saying much. I think Trump has the nomination really wrapped up, and I think the debate reminded me more of like a high school debate. You had questions being asked of the candidates. If you could remove somebody from this stage, who would it be? I mean, ridiculous questions being asked by candidates who have zero chance of winning. So it's going to be Trump. The debates are pointless. And if it was up to me, it would be a Trump Putin ticket for 2024. And that would make America great again.
It reminded me a show. There is a show by the name, I think, The Weakest Link,
Hmm.
where where they have to vote somebody after several questions. They have to vote out someone, and that's basically what happened yesterday at the end of the show. It's
Well,
just
I can tell you I did not watch the debate, but here's the reason why. When you check the polls, Trump beats all of them combined, and he's not going to show up. So why bother watching a bunch of children get up and talk? In other words, it's a complete waste of time. So I didn't bother watch the debate. I did read the summary judgment um, against our friend Donald Trump. And when I looked at it, and by the way, I invited the judge as a friend of him on Facebook because I want to see how he's going to defend this one. If you read the summary judgment, which means there's no justiciable issue, it's law and fact, light most favorable to the non-moving party, which would be Trump, you'll come across this, which his attorneys brought up. They said these are estimates and not necessarily accurate. The amount can be realized, could be totally different. So he actually put a disclaimer in the financial statements, which any reasonable juror, including myself, would say, okay, it's not fraud, because the thing is, these are his highball estimates. But the judge goes, summary judgment in favor of the defendant's fraud. Okay, and when a summary judgment means no jury has a chance to look at. Now, this is a problem that exists in our legal system, Adam, which you're probably familiar with. At least the Florida bar journals keep sending me that less than 7% of civil cases today will end up in trial. Most of them end up in summary judgment. What does it mean for you and all the people here? You don't get a jury trial. In other words, if something happens, it's going to be up to the judge, unless it's a criminal case. That's totally different. But in civil cases, you don't get a jury trial. You get what they call a bench trial. And in this case, the judge is the jury and delivers the execution. He delivers everything. Personally, I believe it'll be reversed on appeal and thrown back. But if you look at it, how politically designed it was, you have a Democratic district attorney, you have a Democratic judge, you have an issue of summary judgment, which if the courts are doing this properly, very seldom will you issue a summary judgment. You want the jury to make those decisions, not you. You're supposed to be the umpire. You're not supposed to be the guy who's declaring, oh, that's a touchdown. What, the ball isn't even close to the end zone? I don't care. I think it's a touchdown. So I think it was a pretty bad decision.
Well,
And I'm encouraging everybody to go read it. You got to find the decision, because on the internet, all you're going to do is have opinions of the decision. You actually have to find the decision itself, read through it, look at page 12 and 13 especially, and you'll see what a weaponization of weaponization.
But there's weaponization all across the board and all along those lines. And I definitely want to hear from Adam. I mentioned it in the first part. But isn't there weaponization around this whole Biden investigation as well? They've basically said that they don't know that they have a solid case and all along those lines and that space, but they are going after him in that sense. And I'm actually also reaching out to a friend of mine who is involved in the legal space and has been a civil rights attorney for a number of years, and also with North Carolina Central University Law Department. So hopefully on one of these shows we'll have Irv Joyner to join in, because he can actually counter and give you a lot of
I'd like to hear. I'd like to hear somebody how they support it. But go on, Adam. I don't know how you support this.
Well, I completely agree with Nick. I mean, this is so appalling. I almost feel like I'm living in Ukraine. When you look at the fact that a liberal attorney general, a liberal judge, found Trump guilty of fraud for doing what every person who owns property does, coupled with that disclaimer, it wasn't even close to fraud. What they're doing is they're weaponizing the rule of law for political purposes. And maybe it feels like North Korea, for that matter, because when you look at the indictments against Trump, that ridiculous indictment in New York by a liberal prosecutor, the ridiculous indictment against Trump for January 6th, when all he was doing was exercising his First Amendment rights and encouraging a peaceful protest. When you look at the indictment in Atlanta by yet another liberal prosecutor in a liberal Fulton County, Georgia, where Trump was merely contesting the election, just like Al Gore did in 2000, just like Hillary Clinton did when she called Trump illegitimate, and just like Stacey Abrams did when she called Brian Kemp illegitimate. See, what's happening here is they're trying to use the rule of law for political purposes to destroy Trump. That's not only anti-democratic, but that is the kind of authoritarianism that you're going to see in places like Ukraine and North Korea, and something that the American people have to reject if they're going to embrace freedom, liberty, and the rule of law.
Hey, Adam, speaking of that, and I mentioned it in the first part and all along those lines, aren't we also having the politicization when we have basically the government about to be shut down and they can't get their acts together, meaning some of the MAGA Republicans and some of the other folks, because Matt Gaetz is part of that crowd and all along those lines, but he can't get together with the speaker and get together on how they're going to stop this thing going on. So they're going tit for tat, thinking that they are unleashing their social media minions to attack each other, because that's really what Matt Gaetz
Yes, this
was
is the.
accusing.
It's just as appalling. This idea of impeaching Biden is utterly ridiculous. There's no basis to impeach Biden, and the Republicans are weaponizing the rule of law just like the Democrats are. And the problem is this: we're supposed to look up to our leaders. Our leaders are supposed to be public servants. They're supposed to have integrity. They're supposed to have some degree of impartiality. They're supposed to be serving the public and trying to do something to positively impact the lives of the American people. What I see going on is the weaponization of the rule of law. I see corruption, and I see a lot of stupidity among our leaders. And what that does is it destroys the public's faith in our institutions, and that is what's corrosive to democracy.
And I have to agree with Adam. This whole impeachment of Joe Biden is also totally wrong. And the reason it's wrong is Congress needs to work on things that actually make a difference to people. Let's take a look. Housing and jobs. We list these things on World Edition. Right now, people cannot afford houses and cars. That's a real problem. That's what they should be addressing, not impeaching Biden or even shutting the government down. Immigration. That is a huge problem. 10,000 people a day going across our borders, and we don't know what we're doing. Abortion. Well, of course, it's a problem. And then the thing is, something we have to deal with. How about the student debt issue? 1.7 trillion and growing. And now the thing is, the students are starting to pay. I guess your class is going to end up vaporizing now, Adam.
Nick, I'm so sorry to correct you, but it's not you.
What?
It's women have to be mindful about abortion. That's
true. Yeah, right. But it's an issue. Inflation is an issue. Okay, these are major issues that Congress needs to address, not impeaching Joe Biden or shutting the government down. What about China? Okay, why aren't we talking about China? China's eating our breakfast and lunch and dinner.
Well, hold on a second. I got to back up, because some of these issues they did actually address during the debate. Now, I agree that none of them stand a chance of winning, but even when it comes to immigration, and I did think that was a valid point that Vivek brought up and everything, because he said that while he supports the wall, he knows for a fact, and I don't know how he knows for a fact, maybe he's got some inside intel and everything, that they are building literally tunnels that can go underneath whatever wall is built. And if that's the case, then it's like the whole notion of the Swiss cheese impact. So, Adam, does he have a valid point? Are we building or thinking about building this wall, and they've already got a plan to go underneath the wall? Because that's basically what Vivek said. And he said that he's got intel of that actually happening.
I think that Nick is right, that what we should be focusing on is securing the border, lowering gas prices, reducing inflation, creating jobs, reducing the corporate tax rate. No, instead we're focusing on ridiculous things like impeaching Joe Biden, which is so ridiculous. We're focusing on indictments against Trump that are so politically motivated that it looks like we're living in a third world country rather than a thriving democracy. And I'll tell you, the original sin regarding impeachment was Richard Nixon. That poor man, who was such a wonderful president, had to go through an impeachment for a simple third-rate burglary that he never authorized. So now we're using impeachment for political purposes. And what this does is it destroys the rule of law. It destroys faith in our leaders. It destroys faith in our institutions. And that is the recipe for destroying democracy. The Republicans are to blame. The Democrats are to blame. We need a new generation of leaders with a vision that says, I'm going to collaborate, I'm going to compromise, I'm going to cooperate, because my goal as a leader is to help the American people, not help myself.
Adam, how Trump fits into a new generation of leaders, in your opinion?
Trump is the best that we have right now if you look at the policies. Now, would I prefer a better leader? Yes. Would I prefer someone who wasn't narcissistic? Sure. But that person hasn't emerged yet. So when I look at Biden and I look at Trump, I look at their past records and how the country was doing under both. And the winner is Trump. And I think that the indictments are not only not hurting Trump, they're helping Trump. And they're creating a groundswell of support that's going to take him to the White House in 2024. But will it be an ideal choice? No. But is it the best choice of the bad ones we have? Yes.
By the way, our LinkedIn Pod TV polls do show him to be double-digit ahead of Biden. And then the Washington Post did their poll, and they showed the same thing, that he's double-digit ahead. Now, and of course, you made the call that he's going to win the election, but I'm going to make another call. That fraud thing is going to be overturned on appeal. In other words, it's a summary judgment that when it goes up the flagpole, it's just going to turn around. Now, remember, it's civil fraud. It's not criminal fraud. Okay, so they have a different standard in terms of evidence. But in this case, no attorney got to really present evidence because it was ruled on a summary judgment. No jury ever looked at that case. And so I find that bad because a lot of the work that I do when a client comes to see me, I say, they go, well, I'm panel jury. I said, no, you're not. There is no jury. This is an administrative hearing. You'll never see a jury. Okay. And most tax cases, guess what? You never get to see a jury. It's all going to be administrative judges, and that is it. Otherwise known as Article 3 judges. Get used to it. So the whole thing, the right to the trial by jury, remember you see that in our Constitution. It's a right to trial by jury sometimes, but we're not going to discuss that.
Nick, just really quickly, and this comes back to the debate and just world politics in general and everything. One of the things that several people did on that stage was they painted the various dealings. They definitely brought up Hunter's dealings with China, but they also brought up Vivek's dealings with China with his companies as well. So there's this notion of China being this number one enemy and all along those lines. So I just wondered, is that a fair assessment? Is that something we're going to see more and more in the presidential race between, it looks like between Trump and Biden in a rematch and everything? And how much of that is something that we need to be concerned about? And do you think the common voter is going to actually put a lot of credence into going against a country that has billions of people as their citizens, but that they may not have a direct relationship with, or one that they are aware of? Even though I'm looking around my house, I'm seeing I've got a microwave that's probably Chinese made or made by one of the other Asian countries and other appliances that might be as well. But most people aren't thinking about that. But even though they are thinking about their pocketbook. So how important is this whole demonization of China going to be in the election? Adam and anybody?
It shouldn't be demonization, but it should be an understanding. There's a great website on Facebook called Understanding China. And you have to understand China is the most dysfunctional relationship you can imagine. They love us because they make a lot of money and they build their economy off us. They hate us and they're trained as kids that we're the evil empire. So we have the ultimate love-hate relationship with China. Nevertheless, we can't ignore them. And we tend to ignore them. They're a huge economy. They're the second biggest economy, soon to become the largest economy in the world. And they're gaining ground internationally. So we have to understand China. And China is not the United States. It's a very homogeneous society. It's a very dictatorial society. They're totally different over there. But there's an ultimate love-hate relationship that exists. In other words, I've developed really good friends with this guy, Steve Tan, over at Understanding China, is the administrator there. They have over 120,000 people. I broadcast this through. 120,000 people in China watch our thing. But here's the problem. This is where the United States is failing. Facebook, you have to go through Facebook first. Facebook blocks us. Now think about it. As much as we complain about how China is dictatorial, Facebook is dictatorial. They block I'm not being blocked now by China. You know who I'm being blocked by? Facebook in San Francisco, California. Hello, United States of America. But I'd like to listen to other people's thoughts on that. But what we're demonstrating is we are dictatorial here, especially Facebook. But
I see nothing wrong with China becoming probably sooner than later the largest economy. Don't forget that several hundred years ago, China was the most powerful and rich nation in the world by far. So if they are today with their 1.5 billion people will become the largest economy, it's a natural process. The problem with China is that it joins all anti-US blocs such as BRICS, which is China, Russia, South Africa, Brazil, and somebody else. They obviously want to display their own some kind of currency, which I even don't know what exactly this, but they want to replace US dollar as the currency of the world accepted currency. And there are many other things, and never mind, they're spending now billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars on their military budget and preparing to take over Taiwan. So these things are definitely wrong from U.S. point of view, not the fact that they would become the largest economy.
Well, look, I think that one point that we're missing here is there's a difference between China and the United States, and it's called intelligence. The people of China, the average citizen is far more intelligent than the average American citizen. Our country is beset by morons, and stupidity is the biggest threat to this country. Okay? China has intelligent people, China has an elite educational system. Here, we're the opposite, and we're seeing the rise of stupidity, and that is antithetical to democracy. Not to mention that China, they keep their people in line. But more importantly than that, when we talk about what's going on in our politics, the impeachment of Biden, ridiculous. All of the indictments about Trump are ridiculous. But the more fundamental point is in the United States, to be a leader, you have to be corrupt. It's a requirement because it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to run for office. So it's only reserved for those people who are in the pockets of the NRA, other, elite rich supporters. So it's really a club of the exclusive, and it is a de facto authoritarian government where democracy really exists in name only. If you want my opinion, I believe in a benevolent dictatorship. I believe in Singapore.
Hey, Adam, along those same lines, and they did bring that up in the debates as well, is I heard a lot of lip service given to going after some of those big guns that you just mentioned. But those big guns also put in a lot of big dollars. So you can say that you're going to go after Big Pharma. You can say that you're going to go after one of Nick's favorite targets, the insurance industry. You can say that you're going to go after the NRA. You can say you're going to go after all of these different organizations, even maybe less so the Mexican cartel, because that's a foreign interest in everything. But definitely, you can say you're going to go after all these big targets. But for decades, I have heard presidents say that. But then once they get into office, they kind of like backwalk and they don't go after them whatsoever. So why should we believe either Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or any of these candidates that are trying to vie for that job when they claim that they're going to go after some of their biggest donors?
We shouldn't believe them because they're not being truthful. They're just paying lip service to the American people. Although Nikki Haley last night was not only paying lip service, but she was some loudmouth, how rude she was to the other candidates, including Tim Scott. But I think in the United States, because of the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United versus FEC, money rules the day. And you can't have a democracy when money, hundreds of millions of dollars, are required to run for office. That requires you to de facto be corrupt. And we don't have a democracy. We have ruled by the elites. Okay, it is a de facto totalitarian government, and nobody realizes it. If you want a true democracy, then you have federal funding of campaigns, and you equalize the funding to minimize the impact of the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical industries. But ultimately, a dictatorship is a better idea because a good dictator means that you can adapt to change, you can enact policies quickly in response to changing circumstances. And I also think the less liberty you have, the better. I think we have too much freedom in this country. And I think we are too expansive with our First Amendment rights, with our Fourth Amendment rights. We need a more structured society like China, like Singapore, where people are kept in line and people live not just for themselves, but for the state.
Adam,
No.
ancient Greece would fit into your qualification for democracy.
Yes, right.
Yes. And at the same time, they had slavery. And slavery in Greece, for some reason, worked very well. It didn't work well in the United States for whatever reasons. I must admit that at one point in my life, I had a slave. And I don't think that I enjoyed it that much because I always had to find something to get him busy to do this or to do that or so on. But it wasn't that bad either. So slavery.
Well, slavery is immoral, is despicable. It's just so fundamentally immoral. I couldn't ever imagine a society in which that could be accepted, although sadly it has been. But I
It was accepted at one point, and that was another conversation that was going on in the debate as well as to the nature of slavery, because there were some people on the stage that were trying to claim that slavery was a great benefit to the African American community and all along those lines. And I know Tim Scott took offense to that, that I and others that have heard that comment along those lines. But one of the things that you kind of alluded to, Adam, and I don't know what folks think about this, but there was a notion, it even comes back to Greece, of this. I'm not a big fan of elitist government and where only the elite are in control, and I have my reasons for that. But there was a notion of a time, and I want to say it was around the Great Depression and other things, where there were people that were the common citizens were encouraged to be involved in the Congress. Now, they might have only been of one particular class of people, so it might have only been European Americans and white European males and everything, but they came from different economic backgrounds. So they were farmers, there were people that were engineers, there were the drugstore owners, there were a number of other people that were in there. So I was wondering if that is something that we should be trying to encourage more of, because I do agree that a lot of the people that are in Congress right now are basically lawyers and bankers and the elite and all of them.
I do. I think we should be a fan of the working man and woman. I think we should have a participatory democracy, which average people have a voice, because elites are so removed from what goes on in people's lives. I mean, look at what you're seeing in DC right now. Are they doing anything to address the problems facing this country? No, not in the least.
No.
What they're doing is they're trying to get reelected. But when he brought up BRICS, and we got to bring this up again, it's an alliance between Brazil. Now, remember, they're in our hemisphere. Whatever happened to the Monroe Doctrine? Gone. Russia. Now, Russia, we know, is not our friend. There may be Adam's friend.
Oh, again, insulting Mr. Putin is very disrespectful.
There's
Russia
India.
was our main enemy for the last 1,000 years.
Russia is beautiful.
India is Steve Rao's friend, but look, India may not be our friend because India is Russia's friend, and China. Now, wait a minute. India and China in an alliance? Well, there goes 66% of the population. And then tagging along is South Africa. Okay. And what they're trying to do is basically destabilize the U.S. currency and make their currency the currency of choice for closing transactions around the world. Okay, that is basically a direct threat, a known threat to the United States and our hegemony that exists throughout the world. What is Congress doing about it? Was there a question about that came on the debates? Probably not. I didn't see the debates, but I'm willing to bet
they talked about it. They mentioned it to some degree.
Right.
All the hard issues were ignored, including one that we bring up on our show, at least on economics. Social Security goes bankrupt next decade. What's your plan? Medicare goes bankrupt this decade. What's your plan? And the U.S. government is already 33. Plan is just added $2 more trillion to the national debt. What's your plan? Did they bring that up in the debate? They didn't bring it up in the first debate.
No, Adam, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they did bring up the Social Security, because I do think that I remember hearing that, because as I was watching the debate, I was going, I've heard some of these conversations literally on Pod TV. So there might be people that were in the debate corners that are actually watching our shows or listening, because I did hear them mention the debt. I did hear them mention Social Security. I did hear them mention Medicare. Now, whether they gave it the details that we would like to see them give, I would say that they definitely did not. I know that one of your other favorite topics they spent a lot of time on and all in that space, and that is the kind of the power that the big two, that being Meta and Google technology companies, have, and all along those lines. So they spent a lot of time on that conversations because they feel that that is a monopoly, and they may be right. But that comes down to my original question. You could talk junk about them all you want to, but are you actually going to try to break up that monopoly? And I didn't hear a plank.
Also, why are you going after Meta and Google? As much as I don't like those crazy companies, when you have your own house that's dirty, you have a house that sits at 33 trillion in the bloody hole. Okay, as Mr. Wonderful would say, you're 33 trillion in debt. What are you going to do? That's a real simple question. Okay, if they don't have a plan, they need to exit the stage real quickly. Goodbye.
What are the alternatives, Nick? What do you mean by having a plan? Let's see.
Okay, well, there's some simple plans we're going to go over later on.
Spending.
Exactly. By the way, There's two ways you can do that. Okay. Number one,
you will not repay your 33 trillion
no,
debt
no.
by cutting spending
you,
next
you,
500 years.
Raise taxes on-
you can actually get this under control because Adam did one thing. One is cut spending. Any person who cries to the government, and what made me really sick was this. On national TV, they had a congressman crying that his child care isn't being paid for by you, Sasha, and Mark.
Not by Sasha. Sasha.
Right. Right.
That's not
You
an
as congressman,
answer.
for Lord's
It's
sake,
not
you
an
should pay for your own bloody child care. Okay?
It's a
That's just
political
one of many
stand.
places.
Nick, trust
What?
me, all this spending, when you're talking about with Trump becoming president again, he will cut taxes, so there will be even less money coming to the United States, and he will still have to support the Medicare and all other obligations. So there is no way by cutting spending that you will get anywhere. Nowhere in next
But
500
it
Well,
doesn't matter. Here's how you get somewhere economically.
years.
You cut spending and you increase taxes. And frankly,
bingo.
Oh, so what's going to how
unfortunately,
how-
Sasha,
Tony, what is going to do in the office if you will raise taxes
Cut
and he will
spending.
lower taxes?
And raise taxes.
listen, Mr. Canada man. Here, and you know this in your own household. If you want to have more net worth, you either have to get more income, raising money, which in our case is raising taxes, or you cut your spending, or preferably both. And if you do that, Sasha, you have more net worth. This isn't rocket science.
But how you
Anybody can do this.
lower? How you can
Unfortunately,
raise
we don't
taxes?
want to eat the truth.
Nick,
It's
there is an
the
upcoming
citizens.
president who is going to cut taxes because that's his platform, at least in his first 4 years in the office. And now the second 4 years, he'll do the same. He cannot say, oh, you know what?
No.
I fooled you. I'm going to raise taxes instead.
Exactly,
That's not
exactly,
gonna work.
exactly.
How do you raise taxes?
Okay,
Adam,
exactly.
do you believe Trump raising taxes?
If you want to be fiscally solvent, you need to change people's attitude. You have to increase taxes and cut spending. Two things that won't get you elected, but will make our country great again. Okay, by doing
Yeah,
two things
so,
that are not popular.
I agree with Nick that you have to. I would increase the top tax bracket to around 50 to 55%. I would increase middle class, the other brackets marginally, and I would cut spending. And I would have implemented the line item veto, which unfortunately the Supreme Court invalidated in a 6-3 decision in Clinton versus New York, which was a mistake. But that's the two steps you have to take. And the third step that nobody talks about is obesity. Obesity is driving up the cost of healthcare and costs for Medicare and Medicaid exponentially. People got to lay off the donuts. Enough with the sugar. We have more diabetics in this country than there are probably combined in Western Europe. Enough with the pizza, the burgers, the McDonald's. We need preventative health care in this country, and that starts with eating less meat, more greens, exercising,
Yeah.
reducing stress, and focusing on a holistic approach to wellness. If we do that, we'll be going in the right direction.
Adam, one exception. Pizza
You're absolutely correct,
Napolitano.
Adam.
You still eat pizza
What do you
Napolitano.
say about? Well, I do love pizza and I do love pasta because I'm an Italian. But about 40% of this country is obese, and I'm not making a moral judgment. I'm saying the cost of healthcare is so high because you have so many people who are unhealthy due to obesity, and they can't afford healthcare, so that pushes the prices up for anybody who can. And oftentimes, of course, Medicare is going to go bankrupt. We need to cut spending. We need to increase taxes. And we have leaders who have the guts to be honest with the American people, because if not, 10, 15 years from now, we're going to be in deep trouble.
And the problem is we don't have leaders who are honest with the American public because they have to send them the true message. And one thing you just brought up, Adam, this is absolutely true. We have a big obesity problem in the United States. 40%, 40% of people in the United States are obese because of the junk food epidemic that exists. And it eats into our healthcare, our longevity. But because it's not popular to talk about this, people go, well, let's just not talk about obesity. Okay.
Right.
Doesn't mean the problem went away. It meant that we're not going to talk about it because I can't get elected if I talk about it. Cut spending and increase taxes. How popular are those? Both very unpopular. The Republicans, oh, you shouldn't increase taxes. The Democrats, cut spending. Are you kidding me? Both unpopular. But if you want to be fiscally sound on a going forward basis, you need to do both. And there's nobody in Congress, at least these old folks that exist right now, that are honest with the American public and say, look, we're fiscally unsound. They have to admit their mistake. We need to start cutting spending. No internet
Nick and Adam, just really quickly, how are you going to tackle fast food? Are you going to go after the fast food companies? Because that's the issue. It comes down to like the pharmaceutical industry. They are such ingrained in a lot of communities, including a lot of minority communities, because a lot of times they are put intentionally in certain areas and all on those lines. So how are you actually going to do that when they are so powerful themselves? And
I'll tell you how
I'm
going to do it. This is how I'm going to do it. Nick says it's very unpopular to propose raising taxes and cutting spending. Well, why is it unpopular? Because we are populated in this country by a society of absolute morons. That's why it's unpopular. Anybody with a brain would know that's the only way that we're going to get to fiscal responsibility. But no, it's unpopular because we have so many morons in this country that stupidity is the biggest threat from within, not any threat from without. Okay? So you're going to have to find leaders who have the courage to do that. And you're going to have to use incentives to get people to stop going to McDonald's or having that 19th slice of pizza or that second, bag of popcorn. So how do you do that?
Raise prices. Let's see if pizza would cost $75.
I would increase our sales tax, and I would give $100,000 to every single human being at or under the poverty line, tax-free. That's what I would do.
We would give $100,000 for what?
$100,000 to everybody under the poverty line, and I would cut our military spending by 30 to 40%.
Okay, but when you give them $100,000, what are you getting back in return? Are they going to reduce their waistline, Adam?
They're going to have more money to make healthier choices, to invest that money, and to get out of poverty, because people in poverty eat at McDonald's because they can't afford anything else.
For every pound they lose and stay off for a year, give them $1,000. I mean, you can make some financial incentives to reduce obesity, and it probably would be money well spent, because also to reduce your weight is not the easiest thing in the world to do. It's going to take a lot of willpower to stay away from the pizza, the McDonald's, all the Bojangles, all the garbage food that's out there. But right now, here's the problem with obesity. There is no plan to reduce it in the United States. Here's the problem with our financiers. There is no plan to reduce our debt and become fiscally solvent. When we get in trouble, though, we're going to run to the federal government for money, which is what they did in the coronavirus. But someday you're going to run to the federal government. They're going to say, we have no money. And if we do, we're going to have to print it, which means you're going to pay anyway. Through higher inflation, which is what happened, by the way. In order to just print money, you pay higher inflation.
What you're discussing with obese people in the United States is about 40%, right? And you, Adam, said that the morons are about 50%. So the morons actually represent much bigger problems than obese people. So how you identify morons, and there has to be some kind of a deal, a way to deal with them, maybe to send them to Mexico, so you can absorb many more immigrants from Mexico and Venezuela and other countries, and send away morons to these countries.
Talk to any citizen in Western Europe, and what they will tell you is Americans are morons. And I don't mean every American, but there's a large part of our people uneducated, intentionally, willfully ignorant. So what should we do in that situation? We should raise the voting age to age 21, and we should restrict the right to vote to people who have a basic knowledge of government and its functions and who have the requisite moral character. And they should have to take a test, just like we do to drive, to be able to testify to state under penalty of perjury. They're not racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, and they can answer certain questions about, like, what are the three branches of government? What are the different tax brackets that we have? We'll even give them a book to study from. But if we restrict the right to vote, then you have more informed citizens who in turn would vote for more informed, better leaders.
And the other thing they should do, Sasha, and we're going to go over it on one of our future television shows on economics, is they need to read the national budget. Okay, it's published and anybody can read it. But I can tell you, after going through law school, MBA school, LLMs, bachelor's degrees, et cetera, and I know Adam has a lot of education also as well, if not more. Did you ever have in one of your classes a teacher who gave you the national budget to read?
No, they taught us about social justice theory.
Okay, wait. Adam, you're telling me that the most important document that we have outside the Constitution is the bloody national budget that comes up every year. And you're telling me in all the education you had, no one said, here's the national budget, let's review it.
Never.
Never for me either. And this is the problem we have in the United States with our basic education system. It's horrible because it should be mandatory in all high schools. The national budget, which I have on my other computer now, and I'm sitting here reading it, I'm going, you know what? It reminds me, after getting all this formal education, and not only just K through 12, but postgraduate education, not one of my professors said, here's the national budget. Let's rate it and discuss it. Now, if they don't do it in law school, MBA school, LM school, everywhere else, then what do you think the average person in the United States, have they ever seen the national budget or read it? And the answer is probably not. The most important document that represents 25% or more of everything that you do that year is not being discussed. And I'm sure they didn't even discuss it in the debate. Part of the reason I didn't watch it, because I know they're not going to say, here's the national budget. What do you think about the Department of Interior spending? And let's go take a look. Is there any way that we can modify this? No.
Yeah, I agree. And the only thing I would add on to that is, let's take a lesson from our good friends in Finland. Finland, what a beautiful country. What beautiful people. And I'll tell you why. They wash their windows every day. You want to know why? Because they take pride in their communities. They want their communities to look beautiful. And when you take pride in how your house looks or how your apartment looks, and everybody does it at the same time, people take pride in their community, and that reduces crime, that promotes health and well-being, and it's those little things. It's called broken windows theory. It actually makes a difference. But for us to get out of the corrosive effects of democracy, we're going to have individuals start taking some responsibility. And if we do that in the aggregate, there can be some change, but I'm not hopeful for the future of this country. And I'm not hopeful for the future of our education. And I think our educational system, and particularly our universities, are precisely what is leading to that corrosion.
Right. Or they would actually, during all this education I went through, we would have at least one class discussing the national budget. See, to me, that was a big failure, a big F in our education system, because you cannot go K through 12, then spend 10 years in college and not have one professor pick up the national budget and say, let's discussing it on our shows, only because the media never discusses it. And it's
instead they're talking about white privilege.
Well, if you're an elite, you know it, but if you're not elite, you don't know it. So
I agree.
It's really awful. I mean,
but let's be realistic about something. Do you expect people who just came from Mexico or Venezuela or some other countries that they're going to read the budget?
Absolutely.
I don't expect them to. Many Americans who are born here are not going to read the budget.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It should be required as part of our educational system. Our education system is not designed to sit there and how you say pander to immigrants who come in here. Our education system is designed to educate the people that are here. One of the most, if not the most important document after the Constitution, Bill of Rights, is the national budget. It's published every year. The 2024 budget is out, and it should be read mandatory by everybody. And the media, how much discussion did you see on the national budget, Sasha? Zero. Instead, let's talk about Hunter Biden. Let's talk about Trump's January 6th. Let's talk about anything, but let's not talk about anything that makes a difference to your life. And one of them is the national budget. Yes, we're going to be discussing that on economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. So I'm making a plug.
Well, look, I'll just add one thing, and that's that I teach at a university in Georgia, and all of my students for the last 12 years, they say, you're so different than every other professor. You're so unconventional. And it's like, well, the reason is because I teach you what the real world is like. And if I'm the exception, then we have a real problem with the rule. And I also want to say that I hope one day to meet Vladimir Putin, and I'm hoping that I get to do that one day.
You have to hurry up because he's not a young man, and he's not going to wait for you indefinitely. Oh, by the way, about budget, Russia published today its budget, and guess what? Military spending has been increased 70% since last year. It's now around, I'll give you the number, 100 trillion rubles, which translates to roughly $200 billion for a little economy like Russia represents today 1.5% of the world economy. 1.5%. It's a 1/6 of U.S. economy. So how come with such an insignificant country with a little population of 140 million and going down every single day? Russia lost just in this war with the Ukraine. They already lost well over 275,000 people, and they're young men. There is a demographic problem exists in Russia and will be amplified in the future. So how this country can pretend on a role of a world power with a little tiny economy? Okay, before the war with Ukraine, there was a perception, well, they're nuclear power, they're military enormous power, we have to deal with that, so okay. But you know what? They killed themselves, this myth of their enormous power. And if you're taking, Adam, I remember I asked you on the other show, if Russia wouldn't have nuclear power, would you think about Russia? Would you talk about Russia? No. Absolutely not. No. So they themselves destroyed the only power that they had. Because you see, nuclear power is something, it's imaginary. It's not real. You cannot use nuclear power. You will be distracted in 45 minutes. The 2,000 American Tomahawks, they're all waiting for them to be going into Russia. And you know what? In the next few months, I won't be surprised if US will start to give Ukraine Tomahawks and Ukraine will unleash. Remember, I told you from the history, it's Ukraine which is a power in that region, not Russia. It's Ukraine. All the military production, all the missiles, all the nuclear bombs and anything what you want. It's all was produced during the Soviet Union. It was all produced in Ukraine. Russia has nothing to do with that. It's impoverished. It's a very poor country, and it's not even European country because the substract of Russian people, it's half European, half Asian, from Mongols, from Tatars, and so on. And they're still there. All the people that they're sending to fight Ukraine, it's all from Burats and all these other impoverished Asian nations that exist in Russian part of Russia and so on. Ukraine is a European country. It's a European people. It was always part of Poland-Lithuanian Union. And they remain so until all this time, because so all this Asian traditions that exist today in Russia. And Putin, by the way, is extract of the Asian tradition. If you will investigate his last name and his regions or so on, you will be right there. So Ukraine, as a result of this war, will become a superpower in that region. It's a Ukraine that will absorb all this Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and all these countries. They will go for Ukraine, not for Russia, because Ukraine is a leading country in that region, aspiring to become the European Union and NATO and becoming really European country. So that's where America has to concentrate its effort, especially unlike Vietnam, Korea, all this Afghanistan and so on. No U.S. soldier is putting his boots on the ground in Ukraine. All you supply is machinery that you have to rebuild anyway. It's a time that America will seriously take this responsibility to be ready for war. The war will start because, remember, I quoted last program this famous professor John Mearsheimer, whose theory is a great power war. Okay, but in order to win great power war, you have to be the great power. Is Russia a great power? It was before the war with Ukraine, because there was at least an image of a great power. Now Russia today destroyed its image. What Russia really had to do, I'm sorry to say so, but unfortunately I must. They had to unleash nuclear weapons in first 3 days of war. No
and
one was prepared for that. Everybody would be in horror. America would run away and say, okay, what do you need? You want Alaska? Okay, that's all yours. Well, what else do you need? We need Brighton Beach in New York. Okay, it's all yours. Some Miami, maybe half Miami. Okay, we'll give you half Miami, okay? You just stop it. Stop it right there. We are scared. We're going to die. We're all going to disappear. What nonsense is that? No one. There is only one country that was very close to unleash nuclear weapons. It was the Yom Kippur War between Israel and other countries. They were very, very close. It was that tiny moment that they didn't do it, but they were ready and they were committed to unleash that. Fortunately, it didn't happen. So Russia knows, it was warned by the United States, if you will unleash tactical nuclear weapon, here's what's going to happen. Number one, all your army in Ukraine will be destroyed in a matter of 72 hours. All your fleet in Black Sea will be destroyed the same 72 hours. And much more than that, you, Mr. Putin, personally will be killed. That's it. Now go ahead.
Okay, well, we can see more of it on Pod TV's Ukraine, Russia, and China on Pod TV, broadcasting live from Kyiv, Ukraine on Tuesdays and Fridays. So I'm going to plug that show as we have at 11 o'clock. It's live, but it's also rebroadcast throughout the week on the Pod TV network on Roku. With that, we want to thank everybody on the panel, and we'll see you next time on World Politics. Bye-bye.